Natural disasters have existed as long as humanity and, well, obviously, actually a lot longer. That means that pretty much every century in recorded history has been forced to endure one or more incredibly destructive attacks of nature's strongest powers. And in the video today, we're going to take a look at some of the biggest natural disasters in recorded history and how they affected the people of that era. Number 10. Peshtigo Fire. Most people are familiar with the Great Chicago Fire, with its Mrs. O'Leary's cow tipped over a lantern backstory and the hundreds of dead. However, it's far from the most destructive fire in American history. It's not even the most destructive one that started on October 8, 1871. That dubious honor goes to the Peshtigo Fire of Wisconsin, the most destructive forest fire in America's history, which caused around 1,200 deaths, burned an incredible 1.2 million acres, and burned through 16 different towns in 11 counties. At one point, it even skipped over Green Bay to burn sections of 2 counties on the other side. It even did the same amount of damage as the much more urban Chicago Fire, roughly $169 million. Where the Chicago Fire was a disaster, the Peshtigo Fire was hell, plain and simple. The fire was likely started by careless railroad workers who caused a brush fire, which the dry summer and unfortunate winds soon whipped up into a superfast wall of flame that some say moved almost like a tornado. The flames convulsed and moved in strange ways, eating up all of the oxygen. It looked like the end of the world, and for many it was. There were heroics and tragic losses and desperate survival stories. One heroic man reportedly carried a woman all the way to safety, thinking it was his wife, and when he found it was a stranger, he immediately went insane. A young girl spent all night in the river to escape the inferno, holding on to a cow's horn to stay moored. The worst damage was done to the fire's namesake, the town of Peshtigo. 800 of the fire's 1,200 victims were from there, and the entire place was gone in an hour. Number 9. Changyang Event. There have been many times when meteors and meteorites have graced our planet with their presence, but arguably the one with the biggest death toll is the Changyang Event in 1490. Seeing as this meteor shower event in China happened well over 5 centuries ago, actual details about the event are unfortunately somewhat fuzzy. Accounts of the era report that stones falling like rain killed up to 10,000 people on the Changyang area of the Shaanxi province. Modern experts have expressed doubt over that exact figure. After all, it is the only meteor shower case with such a giant death toll. However, pretty much everyone agrees that a dramatic event happened at the reported time and place, and it's speculated that a breakup of an asteroid may indeed have resulted in a deadly rain of celestial hell. Number 8. Calcutta Cyclone. The Ganges River Delta area is no stranger to tropical storms, but the Calcutta Cyclone of 1737, also known as the Hooghly River Cyclone, ranks among the absolute worst. It struck on an early autumn morning just south of the city of Calcutta, tearing 200 miles inland before finally calling it a day. The cyclone brought with it 30 to 40 foot storm surge, a sudden rise in water levels in the Ganges, along with 15 inches of rain in just over 6 hours. The combination of these elemental attacks was catastrophic. Most of the city of Calcutta, largely built of mud huts and brick buildings, was utterly demolished. The city suffered 3,000 casualties, but the cyclone's overall damage was over 100 times worse. The disaster is estimated to have killed up to 350,000 people and destroyed around 20,000 boats, ships, and canoes of all shapes and sizes. Number 7. Dadu River Landslide Dam. On June 1, 1976, a huge earthquake shook the Kanding-Luding area of southwest China, causing all the problems that a major 7.75 magnitude quake can cause. What happened next was worse. A landslide dam, which is caused when debris from a landslide blocks a river, was formed. After building a nice reservoir behind it for 10 days, the landslide dam eventually breached. The water cascaded downstream as a catastrophic wall of death, flooding the areas it encountered to the tune of 100,000 deaths. Number 6. Coringa cyclones. Coringa was a large and prosperous Indian port city at the mouth of the river Godavari. These days, it's still there, but only as a mere small village. This is because the former busy city went through some of the worst cyclones in history. In 1789, Coringa received a massive blow when a nasty cyclone tore through the area, leaving around 20,000 people dead. The shaken city was nevertheless able to resume its functions, but unbeknownst to its residents, their terrors had only just begun. On November 25, 1839, another much worse first cyclone came, bringing a 40-foot storm surge and punishing winds with it. Once the roar of the storm died down, Coringa's entire port was destroyed. The death count of the cyclone was an estimated 300,000 people, which, along with the 20,000 boats that were destroyed by the storm, marked the end of Coringa's glory days. Number 5. Krakatoa Volcanic Eruption of 1883. What the Krakatoa volcanic eruption in August 1883 lacked in death toll, it killed only 36,000 people, it delivered in pure deadly spectacle. The volcano, which was on a 3 by 5.5 mile island between Sumatra and Java, started giving signs of upcoming trouble months before the incident, starting with massive ash clouds, thundering noises, and strange natural fireworks in the sky. Unaware of the impending doom, the people living on nearby islands took to celebrating the show, only to be rudely interrupted when Krakatoa started a very different and very deadly party. On August the 26th, the first blast threw debris and a gas cloud a good 15 miles into the air. The next morning, the area was shaken by 4 explosions that equaled the strength of 200 megatons of TNT. The Hiroshima bomb was about 0.01% of that, and it could be heard from 2,800 miles away. Superheated steam, hot gases, and volcanic matter scorched the surrounding 25 miles at speeds of over 62 miles per hour. The eruption claimed its first victims via thermal injuries from its mighty blasts, and the rest fell victim to the 120-foot tsunami that came when the volcano collapsed into an undersea caldera. Even after its initial terrors were over, Krakatoa wouldn't stop wrecking humanity's day. The eruption was so strong that it actually changed the climate and dropped temperatures all over the world. Number 4. Shaanxi earthquake. In 1556, the Shaanxi province of China had the extreme misfortune of hosting what is thought to be the deadliest earthquake in recorded history. The quake was around 8 on the Richter scale, meaning it was a great earthquake that is totally capable of leveling communities near the epicenter. The Shaanxi quake wasn't quite content with just communities either. Chinese annals report that it lasted mere seconds, but was so incredibly strong that it destroyed buildings, remodeled rivers, caused floods, ignited massive fires, and even leveled mountains. As you can probably expect, such a massive disaster was bad news for any and all humans who happened to be in its way. The Shaanxi earthquake had an estimated 830,000 casualties, and it actually cut the population of the area by a ridiculous 60%. It also managed to affect the architectural trends of the area. Because many people had been killed by falling stone buildings, the rebuilding process saw the adoption of wood, bamboo, and other more earthquake-resistant materials. Number 3. Yellow River floods of China. Between 1887 and 1938, China's famed Huanghe, Yellow River, went through the top 3 most destructive floods in recorded history. The 3,395-mile river is extremely silted, which makes it especially prone to flooding. Since the 2nd century BCE, it has flooded an estimated 1,500 times, and no one can even begin to calculate the death and destruction these floods have brought in total. We do, however, know about the havoc that these 3 ultra-destructive floods brought to the ill-prepared China. In the flood that happened over September and October of 1887, and the famine and diseases that it brought the survivors, the death toll is estimated to be somewhere between 900,000 and 2 million people. An even more destructive one in August 1931 covered 34,000 square miles of land in water and partially flooded a further 8,000. Up to 4 million people were killed by the flood and its aftermath, and a devastating 80 million people were left homeless. This particular flood is often considered the most deadly natural disaster in recorded history. The last of the 3 megafloods came in June 1938, and it was actually completely man-made. Thanks to the military's destruction of dikes near Kaifeng in an effort to stop the approaching Japanese forces in the Sino-Japanese War, up to 900,000 people died. Number 2. The Great European Famine. If even honest men can do terrible things when they're desperate, and the best way to make a person desperate is to make them terribly hungry, imagine what would happen if you make an entire continent starve. Well, actually, you don't need to, because this exact thing happened in 14th century Europe. The Great European Famine happened when bad weather conditions caused crops to fail all over Europe from 1315 to the summer harvest of 1317. The results were nothing short of cataclysmic. The few years of hunger single-handedly stopped a centuries-long time of wealth and growth and plunged the continent into a pandemonium of disease, death, crime, and even the indescribable horrors of infanticide and cannibalism. Millions of people died, and it took until until 1922 for Europe to recover from the terror. In fact, the effects of the disaster can still be felt today. Reportedly, certain parts of France are still more sparsely populated than they were before the Great Famine. Number 1. Plague of Justinian. Just a quick disclaimer, while this one does have a death toll that goes through the roof, it's not technically a natural disaster in the earth rises to devour us all sense of the word, but it's rather an outbreak of a disease. Imagine being an all-powerful emperor trying to cement your legacy, only to find that the main thing history books remember about you is a bunch of rodents managed to kill countless thousands of people living during your reign, and then giving the ensuing epidemic your name. Such was the fate of Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, who became the namesake of the Plague of Justinian. Justinian's plague, which was basically a nasty cellar band version of the Black Plague before it went mainstream, had formed in China and/or India, and its tours eventually took it to Egypt and the assorted trade routes. It got its big break in the year 542 when the rodents bearing this disease finally reached the mighty city of Constantinople. Reports indicate that the city was struck with pretty much all forms of plague at once. Other than the classic bubonic plague, pneumonic and septicemic types were also present. As such, citizens started keeling over by the thousands. Tens of thousands of people died in an extremely short span of time, and matters were not helped by the fact that authorities were unable to dispose of the masses of dead, diseased bodies in a timely manner. After the plague was done with Justinian's Constantinople, it turned its attention to the Mediterranean and later Persia. Its active career lasted for an estimated half-century, though some indicate that the plague continued its Mediterranean tour for a good 225 years. Ultimately, it's estimated that the plague of Justinian killed up to 40% of Constantinople's residents, and the entire Byzantine Empire lost somewhere between 25 and 50 million people. Nice legacy, Justinian. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If slightly horrific, please do give us a like below. Also, do subscribe and smash that notification bell when you do subscribe so you find out when we put out a new video. Also, please do check out another channel I do called Geographics. It is linked to below. And as always, thank you for watching.